Hi, Lonnie.
Join us, Lonnie.
Yeah, sorry, I was muted. Does anyone have a copy of the proclamation that we're supposed to read at the beginning of this meeting? Carolyn? I can dig one up.
I can get it and I can read it for you. Just give me 1 minute.
Okay, that's great.
Okay, this meeting is being held pursuant to and in compliance with ordinance number 20-A16, an ordinance to ensure the continuity of government during the COVID-19 disaster. The opportunity for for the public to access and participate in this electronic meeting are posted on the Albemarle County website at the Albemarle County calendar. Participation will include the opportunity to comment on those matters for which comments from the public will be received. And it's all yours now.
Okay,
Thank
great.
you.
Okay, so we had two primary agenda items today. I think I got an email about some others. But our two primary agenda items today are to talk about the stream health policy proposals, and then also to look at prioritizing our list of policy items that we have out there on Google Docs. So
Is the policy items list called potential conservation policies?
yes.
Okay, making sure I've got the right thing.
Yeah, and has everyone been able to locate that on the Google Drive?
Yeah, I have it open now. I'm just trying to find that again. Potential, yep, I have it.
Okay. And maybe I can open that too, just to let's see. Google Drive. Oops. Hold on just a second. I'm just going to open that up. Okay, while I'm opening this up, have all of you been engaged in the stream health policy discussion, or have you looked at the list of policy proposals by the rural stream health process?
I glanced at that, but it was a while ago.
There's also a survey that they issued that would be worth taking at some point if you haven't taken already.
Could you send a link to that?
Yeah, let me I can probably even open it up.
Okay.
Let me so I got this one up. We do okay. I'm gonna go ahead and see if I can share my screen. Okay. So you guys can see that, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so this is the main website. And there's a bunch of different links here. And then you can go here. And then I believe, let's see.
And this is what Kim said she's been spending a lot of her time on. Is that true?
Yeah, and let me see if this is the let's see if this is the right questionnaire. 10-year. Oh, okay. Yeah, so here's the questionnaire. And you can rank different different things, strategies they came up with. And we can also see like where people have ranked some of these items. Like reestablish countywide requirements for perpetual retention of management of buffers. And they have a section for regulation, a section for education, a section for incentives. And this is one that our committee has talked about in the past too. One of the restoration requirements when agricultural forestry land is converted to residential use. What's happened in the past in some circumstances, and it's gotten better, I think, in recent years because staff is sort of aware of it. But you've had situations where people have used agricultural exemptions to dodge all the rules and regulations that are placed on residential development. So they will put in a quote unquote farm road through stream buffers, which wouldn't be allowed if it were a driveway for residential use. And they'll also they'll do things like they'll put in quote unquote farm ponds that would have required a permit from the Army Corps of Engineers if they were legit ponds for residential development. Or they'll go through critical slopes, or they won't, when they develop the houses, they won't have adequate buffers on streams. So the question is when these activities occur in the guise of agriculture, when someone turns around and says, well, actually we changed our mind, we're not agricultural anymore, and this is residential, what do we do? Do we just say, oh, okay, well, you're good, or do we actually have a policy that rolls some of those things back? Like, listen, your driveway needs to be out of the stream buffer, and you need to restore the 100 feet. And it's been my personal opinion for a long time that we need to close that loophole.
Is this survey assessing whether there is a will to close the loophole? I'm just only seeing a portion of it.
Yeah, I think this is the idea. This was sent out to the public, and so I think the idea was that the public would say whether they think that this is, whether they think this is an effective strategy or not.
Okay.
And you can see the actual majority of people think that is actually a very effective strategy. I'd be curious to see who the 10% are who don't think it's effective.
One of them is going to be my neighbor.
It's interesting to read the comments. People have made comments on here. This one to make stream mitigation nutrient banks permitted by right. The idea is that we do want more nutrient banks and stream mitigation projects in Albemarle County. The reason is because if we don't, then people will trade when people have their wetlands impacts. They will be mitigated outside of our county. I mean, sometimes really far away from our county.
Where are the rules on the mitigating that trading scheme? What houses those, for lack of a better word, the rules that manage that concept?
It is extremely regulated. There's like multiple agencies involved in that whole process. But the Army Corps is one of the agencies that is involved in that. So I think they also have to be, they're also run through, I should know more about this, but they're also run through DCR. Is it DCR or DEQ? I can't remember, but they have to have approval on multiple levels. So it seems counterintuitive that after all the regulation and permitting they already do at the state level and the federal level, then they have to come back and then get a special use permit from the county. The other piece of this too is that it's one of the reasons we don't see very many of these projects is because they're really expensive, the upfront costs. And part of that is all the permitting. So, there's a lot of people that even though they can be very profitable, there's a lot of people that don't sign up for them.
The creation of the bank versus the transfer of the credits.
Yeah, well, you have to create the bank. You have to generate the credits before you can sell them. And you can't even generate the credits until everything is permitted, right? So you don't have any revenues. You have a huge upfront cost to start up.
Sure.
And so that means that for the most part, only people with a lot of cash on hand can afford to do these projects.
What sort of, I guess I just need to find the whatever the controlling legislation and regulations that exist about that to be able to understand how it works. So I'll see if I can dig that stuff up.
Yeah, and Innisfree went through where my wife works. They went through this when they established their wetland mitigation bank.
Oh, so Innisfree has one. Okay, that's good to know.
They do. They're a wetland mitigation bank, not a nutrient bank. And there's a nutrient bank in Charlottesville, actually not too far from 29. I just don't know how many credits it has.
So this would allow someone to buy and then to remove wetlands elsewhere, but you say it's not specific to county or even region, probably. It's statewide?
It's based upon hydrological unit codes.
Okay.
So you have to be, within several hucks of of where it is. So I mean, for us, that's pretty much the entire. Is it like the entire Rivanna James watershed?
Which is pretty big.
Yeah, I mean it's big. It's really, I mean, so someone could impact a wetland or remove a wetland entirely from Albemarle County and then restore one over in Chesterfield.
The whole idea just makes me cringe.
Yeah, I mean, ideally we would say, listen, you can't do that at all, but
Right.
Unfortunately, that's not a power that localities have. So the best you can do is say, all right, well, if you are going to remove it, at least for goodness sakes, let's do the restoration in the county that was affected, right? But if we don't have
logical.
If we don't have banks to sell those credits, then we can't do that.
And it also allows for better supervision of what really gets done.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's a very important factor.
Yeah. So anyway, I don't want to spend a lot of time on that. And then review opportunities for better alignment with the Chesapeake Bay. Interestingly, again, once again, 75% on that. And then one that I think we should dive into a little bit, which is probably going to be the most controversial, is adopt the full Chesapeake Bay Preservation Act. So I mean, that's so the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Act, what the county has currently done is they've adopted half of the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Act, mainly the portion that applies to residential development, but we did not adopt the ag portions of the Bay Act.
Do you remember the rationale for that or why it was split out?
I think it's the same as it's always really been. I think the people were
It's
politically,
just a Farm Bureau thing?
yeah, politically people have always been shy of, the agricultural community is very opposed to any kind of regulation.
No, that's not, we're not going to perpetuate that notion. There are portions of the agricultural community surrounded by Farm Bureau that are, because I am fully a farmer and I am very much in favor. So there are plenty of us out there too. Let's put it squarely on Farm Bureau because they've got some issues.
I appreciate that clarification. So basically one of the big pieces of this, and this is actually under discussion with the Soil and Water Conservation District right now too, because of the potential financial impacts that it might have on the district if it were to pass. And there's some political things I might get into as well, but the big thing is that the buffer size for agriculture would go up to 100 feet. And if a farmer had a reason that they needed a buffer size that was less than 100 feet, then they would have to come to the conservation district and get a conservation plan, which is much more complicated than conservation plans that we're used to offering now. The ones we offer now are just sort of like, here's a bunch of nice ideas, do them if you want. But
Yeah.
this would be one where they actually have to follow through and implement the pieces of the plan.
Is there funding or anything in the act? I've not read the whole thing still.
So there is no funding in there is no funding in the act. There was funding when it initially rolled out. And as it's continued on, that funding has atrophied to the point that it doesn't exist. And
Yeah.
now localities within those areas rely upon locality funding to fund that portion of the act.
And does the Soil and Water Conservation District still have any funds for this kind of stuff?
No.
Damn.
So if we were to adopt this, we would need, we would need appropriate funding to support this. I think there's also the legitimate issue was raised with a lot of people that says, we had a lot of farmers, we said, hey, fence your cattle out of streams at 35 feet. And you'll be doing this great thing. And so everyone did that. And now to come back and say, well, I know we said 35 feet, but now it has to be 100 feet. That would really be stepping on a lot of toes.
Well, they'll just have to grandfather. I mean, we have that. I don't know how big our buffer's here, but there's no way we could afford to refence everything.
Well, exactly. And so I think one of the recommendations I think I'd like to see come out of this committee is that I think if the county was to pursue this strategy, that they should consider grandfathering existing practices. I think the way residential practices have worked, it's not until a building permit has been issued on a property for the rural area that they enforce the stream buffers.
Mhm.
Personally, for residential,
Or even not then.
or even not then, but ideally, it's when a building permit is issued. And so I would say that for residential, I think that we should, I think we should stop the grandfathering. We should just straight up require 100 feet or let it establish if it's not there, with the exception of properties that are actually like houses that were built in the stream buffer itself, which we can't
Right.
exactly
You can't
tell
take
someone.
down the house. Yeah.
So that would be the grandfathering would remain for residential, but then for the agricultural parts of the Bay Act, I think we should only apply it in the case of which, a new subdivision request has been received or a building permit. And I did run some numbers on this. I have a request into the county GIS department to give me more accurate numbers. But what I wondered was how many potential applicants would be coming to the conservation district if it were grandfathered in the way that we discussed per year. And the number that I've come to so far is 16. So that's not terrible.
But Lonnie, isn't it, don't we want to say not if they adopt this, but we think they should adopt it with these provisos?
That's something that we could we have in the past recommended that the county adopt the full Bay Act, and that is something that this policy committee could forward on to the larger committee to reassert that with some of these conditions that we think might be useful.
Well, that's personally what I would like to do, is say we think they should, but things are local and local. So because of that, we want these different provisos.
Yeah, So did we lose Kate?
Sorry, I had a cat emergency. I've been listening, but I had to go clean something immediately.
Oh, I know exactly how that is.
I heard it all. I just didn't want you guys to hear what I was doing.
No, that's okay. I've heard that before. I've faced that. We have a cat as well. So are you also in agreement that that we should forward this as a thing that our policy committee recommends adoption of? With the
Yes, I mean, I think there are lots of benefits to having this overarching legislation in place. It's already been put together. It saves a lot of time, staff time, just in not having to craft something new.
I mean, I think it is worth noting that, so I know Ann's estimate is that this would be an FTE for the district. That I know it would be like 16 applications, but apparently these conservation plans can go into great depth. And it's not the only request from the county in terms of like a lot of these, as you get into some of the other sections, there are other aspects, if they were adopted, would also affect the district.
Mm-hmm. I mean, just having conservation plans in place and having a mechanism with which to create those, that in itself enables biodiversity to exist in our county, just purely based on what our larger committee is interested in. I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the Bay Act also brings with it some types of, not justification, but reporting requirements enabled that to get to that agricultural threshold. And I think that's baked in there. And that's something I don't think we currently have in place in the county. Is that right?
Yeah, that's true. And I think, and I do have to preface everything by saying, we have this will be a topic of conversation at our next couple board meetings with the Conservation District. And there are, we have members of the Farm Bureau on the Conservation District. So it's not going to be uncontroversial, and there's going to be some degree of opposition. A lot of that will be about, like, do we even have the staff to do this?
And that's a convenient way to undercut things. Always, do we have the staff? I think the staff can be justified by a wide range of positive actions that all of these things assist with. If you think of it, or if I don't ask you, would you loop me in on some the meeting times for the Conservation District? Are those open? Because I would love to listen.
Oh yeah, they're all public meetings. All meetings and subcommittee meetings are public. So yeah, I can definitely do that.
That'd
But
be great.
so you know that anything that I say regards into the process that we're going through is a work in process and does not represent a position of the district.
Absolutely.
But I think it is important to early on acknowledge that these concerns were practical, in terms of staff costs, in terms of grandfathering things in. And I think maybe phasing this in too, in terms of, like, there's a lot of work in terms of data that I think needs to happen, as you said, an analysis that should happen before the regulatory piece kicks in. In a perfect world, I'd almost, at the state level, there's already sort of the big Bay Act piece. Sorry, not the Bay Act, but on the big action plan in terms of the Bay. They've already sort of said, here's what we expect in terms of we want to get to this percentage of buffered streams by this date. And the assumption is, if they don't, then they will tighten regulations across the state.
Well, that is a great argument for self-regulation.
It is. And I think it's almost a shame that, we couldn't do something at the local level in that regard, which is that farmers, I know you don't want to be regulated. If there's a way to say, if we got X number of voluntary signups to fix these things on their own, then we wouldn't bother pursuing regulation, because.
And I do not support that, because one bad actor can ruin a heck of a lot of stuff without good regs.
It is true. I mean, when I look through the data, most of the stuff that I see is is not farmers per se. It's like people with excessively large mansions that have
Yes.
that are doing quote unquote hay.
Yeah. And my neighbor who convinced the county, or I actually think that someone on staff told him, if you pretend to be a farm, you can do whatever you want in the buffer.
Well,
He did that and he got away with it. And just the downstream effects here have really brought this to bear, where that's the kind of stuff that ruins it for everybody.
yeah, I did have an interesting conversation with staff about, as I was looking at these 16 properties that would be, as an example, in 1 year, that would be potential applicants if this were enacted. And one of them was a large property with a $3 million house, and that was in hay for agriculture. And the question that I asked staff was, land use takes, requires two acres, at least 2 acres for a home site. And then if your home is bigger than 2 acres, then they extend it to cover whatever additional there is. I kind of think it should be like your home footprint plus 2 acres, but maybe that's just me.
I don't quite think 2 acres does a heck of a lot for anything.
This one house that I looked at, the house was over an acre. And so I'm just
It's over 44,000 square feet. Wow.
So I'm just saying, when the house is over an acre, then that 2 acres doesn't do squat, right? So, but nonetheless, the question I then asked the water resources people was, I said, so when you're looking at whether stream buffers should apply, do you take the land use definition of agriculture and do you require everything within 2 acres to have a buffer? And they said no, because that's a land use definition of agriculture, not the definition of agriculture used by for water protection. And my question is, do we have a definition of what agriculture is in terms of water protection, and how do we verify it? Like,
so they didn't give it to you. They didn't say no.
Yeah, I did ask the question. I asked the question literally like 5 minutes before
Okay.
I got on this meeting, and it would be helpful to know, do we have the same methods available to us? Can we ask for a Schedule F to prove that they're a farm? Can we?
We have to. That is simply a base requirement. And I thought that was in the Bay Act.
Well, we're not full participants in the Bay Act. So
I know, that's what I'm saying is full participation, I would hope, would help in that regard and just streamline some things to just kind of remove that as an issue or an impediment.
So that's helpful. So these are the regulatory things. I'll let you pursue. There's also some voluntary. Well, I'll go to those too. It doesn't matter. Let me just do continue. So here's some of the incentive programs. And remember, of course, incentives take money. Someone's going to have to fund those. And so this one's a little weird. Establish riparian buffer easement program. We already have one at the district, as you know. We just have large upfront, we have to have money to maintain that program. So there has been discussion about maybe the county could help fund the operational costs of the easement program so that there weren't as many upfront costs for landowners. It'd be easier for lower income landowners to get easements on streams. So that's an interesting idea.
In perpetuity?
Yeah, in perpetuity. And you can see there's a lot of support for that, 74%. You should go back and look at the statements people made too, which are very interesting. Here's what I was alluding to: a conservation easement assistance program to help landowners in the transactional costs. And then there's this one. I love this comment. I'd regulate it instead. I mean, it's a thought. You could pay someone to protect the stream, or you could just pass a regulation and. So, but these are things that are under consideration. create a stream health improvement fund. Sort of similar idea, to help office assistant landowners engage in conservation or cost share programs, and to support specific restoration projects that benefit stream health. So this is an interesting idea too. Remember, I mentioned if you want to do a stream mitigation bank, there's a huge upfront costs. If you had a way to like a low or no interest loan program or something that could help kickstart these projects, then lower income landowners could afford to do stream mitigation, which that'd be spectacular. And it's
Hopefully with a plan, though, hopefully with planning in place that would tell them how to do it versus just provision of funds for doing things that could end up with, goodness knows, non-natives planted.
yeah, and I think, a lot of these are sort of vague proposals right now. I think there's a lot of devils in the details with all these.
Yeah.
The Board of Supervisors is ultimately going to, pick some of these that they like and run with them.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about the Bay Act one is that it was originally shelved by staff. Staff decided that it was, they said it's no support from the agricultural committee. The agricultural community doesn't support this, so we're not going to pursue it.
Which means Farm Bureau, and I'm tired of Farm Bureau speaking for anybody.
Yeah, and so, but then it was revived at the Board of Supervisor meeting and added back in. So that was kind of interesting.
Yep.
I mean, this one is no brainer, but it's always, what does that really mean? We've had cost share programs in Albemarle County for, since a little after the Great Dust Bowl. And so, sure, I hope the county does continue to support cost share programs for BMPs. But what does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
Does it mean more money? Does it mean, additional staff's assistance for the district?
I think we need voluntary programs beyond a change for better regulation. Like we need to step it up in the regulation and then use voluntary programs above and beyond. That's what I'd like to see. Just because we got a lot to do.
I like this one, explore options, providing incentive for low impact development, LID practices. I think I really like that idea. I think we do more to support LID, or in the growth area even require LID. But I think it should be, oh yeah, here's a great comment. Please, everywhere, every developer.
Yep.
And then, but yeah, these comments are really, really worth considering.
Mm-hmm.
And then, as I said, they have an education one. Develop a county-wide water testing program for landowners. This is interesting because, as you know, we do have volunteers already in the county that would stream watch that do, but they do specifically the Rivanna Basin.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have volunteers that do that doesn't cover the whole county, because we have large parts of the county like the hardware. They're not in the Rivanna Basin, and so we don't have the same water quality volunteers going out there and monitoring streams that we have in other parts of the county that we do in the Rivanna portions.
Right,
So,
which would probably be better served by providing more funding to RCA to expand that program.
yeah, and so I think that's basically what this is getting at. Like, could we expand what RCA is doing? Maybe provide some funding. Once again, it's a little vague, but
yeah,
I think it's going in the right direction. Expand and formalize a new landowner education project. Okay, sure. I'm not sure what that means.
it sounds like educating landowners so they'll voluntarily do the right thing, which I'm not really impressed with.
I'm not opposed to that. A lot of people don't even know about the conservation programs that do exist. But you know, we saw the struggles just with like trying to get people aware of spotted lanternfly. So the same struggles apply. Support expansion of education programs for students and watershed approach, especially at the middle school and high school level. There are some great programs we already have, and expanding, you know, like meaningful watershed education programs. Those are great. Our district helps support those. Western Albemarle is doing some great things with its environmental programs. I'd love to see, I would love to see those expanded across the county. I think that's a great idea too. Grant opportunities for stream health restoration. This was actually my comment right here that I made. Be careful to make sure that administration of the grant doesn't cost more than the grant actually provides. That can be a problem with grants. Some grants are laborious to document. And you end up spending more staff time documenting than you actually got in money.
Yeah.
So anyway, out of these, so we'd like to make, I think we'd like to make a statement, a report back to the main committee. I don't know if we need to take a motion on it, but I think we would need to take we're in agreement. We want to convey to the main committee that we'd like to support the adoption of the full act. Are there other goals in here that we think we should highlight as particularly good ideas?
Well, possibly the ones about the, for me, the conservation easements.
Okay.
Although I don't see that listed in the county's goals for stream health, but
They are. Let me go back again. So that was on the previous, actually that was on the previous page. So I think I can go back. Oh no, if I go back, it takes me to the beginning.
but I do think that the Bay Act is of all those things that were listed there, the most important thing.
Okay, great. Well, we'll convey that back. So the stream buffer programs, you know, either that is, you know, retailoring the ACE program to include stream buffers, or helping leverage the existing conservation district stream buffer program, and maybe help with the upfront costs of that program. So
I do believe, I think that we need to support some type of enforcement mechanism. And I don't know exactly what that looks like, but
Enforcement of the Bay Act or of conservation?
enforcement of whatever the rules are.
Okay.
In that goes to just equity of different people. You know, if one neighbor is responsible and the other neighbor is not responsible, that's what government is for, is to say, well, actually, neighbor number two, we're all having to meet the same rules here. You know, I do think that's a function of, you know, someone here to say, hey, we have rules for a reason.
okay, and also just to clarify, who's taking minutes this meeting?
I've got some notes here and the best I can do.
That's fine. I don't think we need extremely detailed notes. We need minutes that we can report back.
Yeah, it'll take me a couple days to formalize them, but I'll get them out to you guys to look them over. And once you guys say they're okay, I'll get them to Carolyn.
So that's stream health. So to summarize, and I guess I should make a motion just so that we have it on file.
I don't know that we have to do that at this level, in that we aren't deciding anything other than, you know, we're providing something to a committee of deciders who would have to vote. And I push back on that only because I don't think we should be a subcommittee. Otherwise, we're simply never going to, you know, be able to continue meeting. There are too many barriers.
Fair point. So we'll provide, you know, so we have consensus. I think we have consensus on what we're talking about. And so it would be full support of the Bay Act. support for easements, particularly, for riparian easements. For the Bay Act, we wanted to make sure that grandfathering was included, staff support for the districts, and upfront data analysis. And then I would add to that a phased approach. I don't think we should just drop this in overnight.
Except how does data analysis, which I believe is important in a lot of cases, how do we prevent that from taking 5 more years for any type of meaningful implementation to occur?
Well, that's a good point. I would hope it doesn't.
I get it. I'm feeling so much like we just,
Absolutely. I think that will delay it. I think we can have data analysis after the fact.
As you go.
Have it concurrently.
Right, right, as you go.
Concurrent data analysis is what I'd like to say. Is that okay?
Yeah. Well, what about a phased approach? I mean, I think, there's a lot of pieces to the Bay Act. Do we rip the Band-Aid off, and do we support applying? We rip the Band-Aid off.
Only because there's not going to be a one size fits all anyway.
I think we will need to leave some time for filling, for ramping up staff positions. Like we will, as I said, with the district, like right now, we couldn't support that if we wanted to. We physically do not have the people.
Right.
So we do need enough, we need enough room to hire qualified candidates. And we have people missing on the ag team already, that we have positions we have to fill. So it's becoming very challenging to hire people at the salaries that we can offer.
Yeah.
Because of housing costs in Albemarle County.
So those are staff members within the district versus committee members.
Did I say committee members?
No, I'm just clarifying my understanding. You're talking about staff positions that remain open because they just can't get the qualified people. Is that yes?
Correct.
Okay.
Right, because people can't live on the salaries offered on the expenses that it is to live here.
Yeah, and I think that there's discussion of raising salaries too, but I don't know. That's sort of I don't know. We only have limited funds, but if you do know qualified people, please send them along. If you know qualified people interested in conservation, please send them along. And as I said, of course, as before, I think there's going to be a lot of discussion at the district, and some people are not going to be a fan of this approach. Okay, so moving on. Let me go to conservation policies.
And Lonnie, just to let you know, I have to leave at 3 because I have someone coming interviewing for a job that I have to deal with. So she's supposed to be here at 3, so I just have to drop out at that time.
Okay, well, I think I can do this fairly quickly. I think what an easy way to do this would be, I think we've talked about most all of these in the past many times. I think it's important to look through them. Drop me an email if you don't understand what one of these are. Make sure that you add to these. Like if you, like Kenan had some things that may be additions to this list. So if there's policy ideas that we need to add, please add them to here. Note these columns that we've added here, like is there enabling legislation? Is there reference to it in the comprehensive plan? Is it in the county plan of work? These are all questions sort of meant to help us prioritize these, to determine, is this something that we can realistically implement right now? Obviously, if we don't have enabling legislation, it's kind of a no-go. And we could always ask the county to put it in their legislative agenda, but that's the limit to what we could do in terms of policy. And so, and also funding is also an important qualifier here too. So if you can find one of these columns that you can fill in, then that's really helpful. So I would ask each of us, and actually I'm just going to create a new column. Actually, no, actually could leave this existing column. So what I want you to do is put your name, in a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 against the top 5 ones that you support in order. So then we'll have a human being associated with those priority items and also a number. And then we can tabulate those numbers after we get those 5 choices, and those will be our. And then we'll they'll work from there. Does that work for everyone?
Sure. Yes, for me, yeah.
Like for example, I can tell you that this one right here. I mean, I haven't decided this is one yet, but I could just do that because I know that's an important one for me. Right,
and I think for me, like limiting artificial turf on county property, I think that's real important.
Yeah. As I mentioned to Kenan, there's sort of a metric, at least in engineering, about how to prioritize things. And usually it is, if you do a grid, right? If you rate things 1 to 5, going on one axis, and 1 to 5 going on the other axis. And on one side, on one axis, you have difficulty, and the other axis, you have return on investment. Then all those things that are easy to do with a high return on investment become your highest priority. And all those things in the grid that are difficult to do and a low return on investment, those are your lowest priority. And then everything else falls in between. So there's sort of a scientific way to come to what, a reasonable priority should be on these things. So you keep in mind, things that are really easy to do with a high impact, those should be our number 1 priorities. Things are difficult to do, and really with a low rate of return, we probably shouldn't do those at all. And actually, I was surprised the first time on my IT engineering courses when someone said, yeah, if something ranks out this way, you just shouldn't do that project. It's like, wow, thank you. I'm glad someone said that out loud. And I've been using that with my peers since then. Like, listen, if we rank a project out this way, don't do it.
Right. Well, logically speaking, that's a good way to prevent as much head banging as you can on the wall.
Yeah, because I mean, we've all had projects that, drag on and just don't generate anything worthwhile. All right, so it is 2:52. Do we have any other comments and matters that we want to bring before the committee before our time ends?
Well, just that I had on our agenda that for this meeting, it was also criteria for adoption of new sites.
And criteria for, thank you for reminding me. That's right. That was one of the ones that was added. We have 7 minutes. So in terms of criteria of adoption for new sites, some of the things that I think are important, I think it's important for us to have a site visit to that site before we adopt a site. Either it's by a friend of the committee or by the committee itself. I think we need to assess, for example, invasive species at the site. Like if the entire site is covered with invasive species, even if we find a rare plant or animal there, there's not a lot of hope. So it's important. That's an important consideration. If there, so, the health of the site, I think we need to consider, is this just a one-off occurrence, or is this a natural community that's actually worth protection? And I think we should give higher consideration to natural communities. I think someone had the idea of tracking occurrences of rare species separately. And I think that might be a good thing to do.
Separately from what?
Separate from natural communities, in the sense that there are some one-off occurrences of, rare plants or animals in the county, but they don't necessarily occur in a place this special. Like, the site itself is not particularly interesting. It's just that there's one occurrence in that place of something that's of concern.
Hmm.
And I can think of a couple in my head that I won't mention out loud, but there are a couple like that.
Sure. Yeah, it certainly bears discussion. So is the larger committee needing information on that criteria suggestions from us?
They're needing criteria on how to rank, how to, the criticism has come from the county, criticism come to the committee before, from outside. I think there's some outside people who say, oh, you just choose your favorite places in the county, and there's no criteria to what
Okay.
what's a site or not.
Sure. But it makes sense to have some criteria to use. You can always advocate for inclusion of something that doesn't meet them all. That's no problem.
So I think we need to rank the site in terms of invasive species, overall health of the site.
What's the purpose of ranking?
I don't know that we need a numeric score out of this, but I do think it's probably helpful to get
almost a color coding system that kind of grouped similar types, or something that instead of just having a long list, but having some type of descriptors that like for different buckets of sites. I would think that might be more valuable.
Well, there are implications for making something a special site and tracking it in perpetuity through the committee. It could mean some additional committee or staff time. If, for example, there's a development project that occurs near that, and we have to spend time discussing it.
Yep.
Time doing site visits to that. So the choice to adopt something as a site is, there are resources associated with that. So we want to make sure that if we do it, that something is actually has merit for that.
I like the bucket approach.
I do think, putting together like a portfolio of, one of the criteria should be like, do we have, how many representatives of this species and or habitat do we already have?
Mm-hmm.
Also size of the site. If something is something in a swamp, is the swamp, half acre or 10 acres? I mean, so size can make a difference. Size of the population.
And so you're thinking like larger sites would gain a higher score than a.
Yeah, I don't even know if to score necessarily. I'm thinking though, certainly at least a list of the things we want considered.
The things we want considered. Yeah, it doesn't have to be a number. Doesn't have
Right,
to be
it's
a
hard
number.
to assign a number, but at least to think about.
But I
Do
agree.
we have something? Do we have others like it? Etc.
Some type of categorization.
Right. And the other thing, have we figured out how we're going to do site visits? Since everything seems to be on Zoom, which at the county, which is hard to do a site visit on Zoom.
Well, hey, I managed one site visit, and I came close to doing another. I came close to a climbing fern location over over near Coesville. So I'm still hoping. I contacted Ruth Douglas about going out with her to a site, and they never got back to me.
Do we have, I guess we have no time. Nancy, it looks like you have to go.
Well, I'm just waiting for the person to arrive. I'm looking out my window and I'm not sure yet, but I will have to.
But if I can throw out there, I do think that we need to have further discussion about how this group and any group like it would meet going forward, in that there are precedents for groups downgrading to something less than a subcommittee. I think being a subcommittee does not serve the purpose for what we're here doing, which is really nothing more than discussion and research that we have to take back to another body. And so that's kind of consistently been a frustrating impediment, I think, where it stifles us providing useful information to the committee, which then could provide that useful information if it decided to further on within the county. So I'm going to see if I can gather some more useful information and present to you all.
I
But
totally agree, Kate.
I just, we all have a lot to offer here, and absolutely Kenan has a lot to offer too. And I just don't think it makes sense to have it stifled.
Well, I think that there is, I think one way we can keep some, it's not perfect, I agree. If we can find some other way to get the actual meeting part of this settled in a more productive way, that'd be great. There are things we can do. For example, as I said, we have data like, I think collaborative documents. And I know there's a move to get this stuff out on SharePoint, on the county SharePoint servers. Some mixed feelings about that, but I think that's one way that we can continue to do work as a committee, is if we can put homework for ourselves out there on the SharePoint site that we can be working on in between.
So for collaboration purposes.
For collaboration purposes, the more we can do work in collaborative documents on SharePoint or Google Docs, the less we have to take up committee time to do it.
Okay.
A good example is turning Kenan loose on this.
Yeah, the problem that I find is that we did that for a long while with the BAP trying to do it, and we always had the most productive time was when we were meeting in person and immediately going back and forth as to getting someone to sit down and actually work on the document, and then hope that someone else would look at it. It seemed that didn't work so well. That was my experience.
I think there's a little bit of both. I mean, I remember working on the BAP as well, and a lot of it was done collaboratively. I mean, it was sort of a mix, because you did have people that just didn't use Google Docs at all. And so it was a mix. But yeah, I do agree with you. I mean, obviously meeting in person is the best when we can do it, but.
It's still, I would have a lot of trouble meeting in person. Like, I couldn't have done this meeting today, particularly in person. So, there are definite upsides and downsides that I look forward to kind of working through and figuring it out, because I think there's a lot of value that we can add. And I want us to be able to do that.
Yeah, or meeting electronically, if there's a way that we can make that work.
Yep. Super.
Okay, well, thanks everyone. And did you manage to get down our list of ways to prioritize sites?
I have a lot of it. I mean, I have some things down. I'll write it up and you guys can edit it.
That sounds
Okay.
great.
That sounds great.
So I'm sure it won't be perfect, and don't be shy to edit. I'm delighted to be edited. So fix it.
Thanks, Kate. Thanks for doing the first part, because that's the hardest.
Absolutely. I'll get it done. It's going to take me a couple days, but I'll email it to you.
I have to go now, but good to see the three of you.
Good to see you. Take care, Nancy.
All right.
All right. Bye, everyone. Thanks, Carolyn.
Thanks, Lonnie. Thank you, Carolyn.
You're welcome. Bye, everybody.
Bye.